In contrast to or juxtaposed against. You know, it's the way it is. Busy pose. Is it pronounced right? Juxtaposed. You got it. I use that a lot.
There you go.
I use it a lot.
I'm asleep overnight and it's all safe.
I'll take it Fridays.
It's one of my favorite.
North fiscal year.
It's funny, it does, like clean the ducks.
Ducks get very stuff.
Oh.
Yeah.
Menards, we rented them every sometimes.
Did you enjoy the mall and all that stuff?
Yeah. I can nice to see, yeah. We were folks out.
My daughter with, Good evening. We will call the special meeting of the school board to order. All right, start with pledge. If everyone please rise.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. Do you want to take the roll?
I will.
Thank you.
Oh.
Christopher Abel,
Here.
Viv Hansen,
Here.
Matthew Phipps,
Present.
Keith Shaw, Matthew Spalding,
Here.
Carrie Trask,
Here.
Tony Vostelica. Thank you.
Okay, next we have perhaps our shortest consent agenda ever. So I kind of suggest
Even a
it's not a
short-
consent
even a
agenda
short-
because there's one thing, but
Yeah.
still. Is there
Even a
anybody that
short
wants to take
report.
it off the consent agenda? Just kidding. So we have the personnel report.
Yep.
Is there anything you wanted to share about that?
I just want to know why you don't use first names of the people that are getting appointed. Do you? Well, let's see. It's like Sheboygan, Alicia, oh, Ashley. No second name. Is that to protect the innocent or what?
Where are you? I'm sorry.
Right on the professional staff.
I think it's the way it printed up for you.
On the computer version, it usually has the
It's
full
all there,
name.
yeah.
Period.
Oh, it
Yeah, I
does?
think it's the way it printed up for you because.
Yeah, they're all there.
Just kidding, really. Are they out there?
Yep.
Okay. Why would that be?
I don't know. That's why I looked at yours and then I looked back here.
Well, anyway, I'll vote for it.
Well, first I would like a motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Hearing none, it's unanimously approved, and we will move on to the main business
meat.
and purpose of this special meeting. I was talking with the superintendent about this, and he asked if we could have a special meeting just to focus on the big picture and some of the parts, some of the, well, I would say impending parts, so that we could talk about that. And I'll turn it over to you to start off.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
I'm just, so with that, then this has been sent to the facilities committee to be brought back to the board?
We can certainly do that, sure. They've been talking about some of this
Right, but
already.
I mean, this is kind of new stuff, and I'm just wondering if the committee is gonna go over this before we would vote on it as a board. We're going back to committee of the whole structure.
Yes.
Go ahead.
You know, one of the things that we were working to do was to have this channeled through the finance committee. The committee chair elected not to, but this was a fault to the last board meeting where the board had made requests to CISA. So this is coming back as unfinished business, you know, to this committee. And the committee chair, you know, thought if there was a, need to come back, to the board, Chris would kind of weigh in there. And he elected that it would be beneficial to have a meeting. It is on there in terms of information, discussion, and potential action, even though I'm not anticipating, that there will be action today, but to make sure that, we're informing the board and you have information to be able to make an informed decision.
Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, sorry. I apologize.
on the Finance and Buildings Committee, there was a consensus that we were asking for more information. So I think this is right in line with
Right.
what we were asking for as a committee. So I'm very happy that it was heard, because we had asked for it like a week and a half ago. Now we're getting results, so I'm very, very happy to hear that there is more information, not just bouncing back, so.
Thank you.
Point of
My
clarification.
only concern is that the committee looks at it in total and a recommendation comes out of committee as committee structure is supposed to work in government. That's my concern.
Okay, here now though.
Yeah, we don't have to do it.
Should I continue?
Yes, please.
So anyways, what we have tonight is we have, kind of a four-staged conversation, one a little bit overview with me, all this somewhat brief, because it would be beneficial to make sure that if you've got questions, we have answers. If there's information that's missing, that we come back with it. Okay, so I have a brief overview. That's going to be followed by our owner's rep, which in here, tonight is John Brigette, representing, you as their owner's rep, in terms of some of the work that's been performed. And he's going to highlight, some of the significant points here, again, making sure that, we're giving you the information you need to make an informed decision. Me and Katie and Heidi was involved in this too, as well as assistance from Angela in terms of giving an instructional perspective. I think we're all talking about the same things, a somewhat different approach. I think from my administrative team, we're getting, closely on this, the same page, not totally there, because we're still working on some finance issues, okay? But what's important to know here is we want to obviously elevate the understanding. We want you to be informed, but we also want to make sure you understand that this is a time-sensitive decision, meaning that if you wanted to move to, as you will see, consolidate schools, and to do this as early as not after, you would have to start work in July, which means you'd have to make that decision probably from your regular board meeting in July to make sure that they can do that, okay? And that's why it's important. You have options. You could pass on that, but as you will see when we go through there, we identified if we reduce from 6 elementaries to 5, that would be repurposing one school and decommissioning 2, but with a net 5, you create $1 million savings a year that could be used to offset, this work that we're talking about, which is significant. So it's time sensitive. That's why we wanted to make sure you had enough time and enough questions and that we are providing you the information. Now, a choice is, and as I laid out in my communication, you can say we're just not ready. We're going to forego saving $1 million, and say we need more time, or to take some other approach. I just need to make sure you're making that informed decision, because that's where the decision rests. So you do have some options, okay? But some of that is explaining why we feel option 1 out of the 5 for phase 1 is significant. And just to highlight, one of the reasons when you start moving from 6 to 5, we could say, well, let's just decommission 1 school and not 2. Well, then you have back-to-back redistricting. And so we're trying to figure out how to minimize the impact. And again, John and others are going to address this a little bit more. But also then in terms of Jefferson, in terms of, we see that as a model school, and we've received a great deal of feedback in there about safety issues and stuff like that. Well, we put the complete school in place with phase 1. Okay, that would mean in addition, what happens then is that, so for example, we have been informed for safety issues, you need more lighting, you need other things. And what would happen without the addition, you put that lighting in, and then you make the decision, put the addition on, you take the lighting out and rechange that. So it's about savings, efficiency, and creating a model school. So that's really just the highlight. There is a lot more, but really so much rests with this first stage. And right now it's time sensitive unless we just really want to, delay this, for a longer period of time. But at risk there then is $1 million in savings that could start paying for some of this and getting some of that work done. But, so that's kind of just, kind of the overview. And I'm going to turn this over to John, in terms of, anything that John would like to highlight. But I would, at any time, open up the questions here that you might have.
Trying not to be too redundant, the assessment and collecting all of that data was significant. We wanted to share that and make sure that the district had full opportunity to use that information. And just to remind everyone, the assessment included more than just our observations. We also used the staff on site. We used administrative members and that team. We made a lot of outside observations on our own. We also looked at compliance, and we also spoke with some of the contractors that had worked in the district. So we really feel we have a good idea of how the district is set up from a facility standpoint, and then also the conditions. The unfortunate finding is the conditions were far worse than I think we anticipated. Some people within the district probably are aware of some of the items. I don't know that anybody holistically knew what the long list was, which was shared with you a couple months ago. Looking at that and then looking at trying to develop a plan, we really had three components that we were struggling with. First was this conditions. It was a much longer list and a much more expensive list than we anticipated when we started. I think the reaction that we've gotten from most of this group and most of the other people within the district we've talked to, same thing. It's much larger. The other thing directly related to plan is the timing. We don't have a lot of time. Time has passed. There hasn't been a lot of investment in the buildings over the past 10, 20 years, and there's a lot of deferred catch-up that has to occur. The other thing operationally, as you all know, the amount of construction time within a district is very limited. It's a very short action. I think that kind of pushes this need for considering a decision as early as next month. Making that decision next month really would allow us to plow forward with construction in 2025, 2026. Again, not to beat the dead horse too much of this conditions thing. The buildings are in a state where many of them are beyond expected useful life without investment over the past 10, 20 years. A lot of the buildings are not what we would call 21st century ready from an education delivery standpoint. Again, I feel very comfortable saying that because of the communication we've had with the administrative team and with on-site staff. Continuing, as the district has done recently over the past, let's say, 10 years that we can guess at, the deterioration of the buildings is just going to accelerate. There's just not enough happening to stop the deferral and the accumulation of deferral. Jumping into time, we looked at putting this assessment together in such a way that we would develop a 1 to 2 year plan, possibly a 5 to 10 year plan for the district to work with. Again, the unfortunate finding is we're at over $45 million of deficiencies in that 1 to 2 year plan when we look at the whole district. It's a number that, again, budget-wise, the district's not prepared to act on immediately. It's something that requires us to push this out over a longer period. Looking at that, the 20-year plan was an idea of pushing these options forward in such a way that you can make an appropriate decision, but then also start guiding the district from a conditions, time, and dollar standpoint into recovering, where you're at and what you want to deliver. And I think that's something that everybody within the district will have to work together on. Looking at this decision in July, Again, that's gonna move the plan forward in such a way that we would have a continuance of construction starting in 2025, and it would go all the way through 2028, and probably 2029. And again, that's identified in the phases, which I'll get to in just a minute. Early start, if there is an option for non-referendum borrowing, we feel because of the conditions and the time that it's money well spent. It's money that, again, you are borrowing. It's not something that the district is done much of over the past, but that investment's going into assets or going into your buildings, and I think it will catch things up. It may be the only way to really catch things up. Setting a plan moving forward, I think the 20-year plan is a good one because you're not saying that in the 5th year, the 10th year, and the 15th year, we're going to do this, this, and that in detail, but it's getting you to take a look and push those things forward that need to be looked at in addressing not only the delivery of the education, but also maintaining the asset value of those buildings and your properties. The other thing that's really significant, or at least we feel is significant, is to create an example so that the community can see what kind of school you really want to have in the district. And we focused in on Jefferson some time ago because it's a relatively new school in relationship to the others. It's landlocked, so the site isn't gonna, you're not gonna extend the site or add much to that site. The building itself is relatively at capacity or close to capacity. So in our thoughts, to do something quick and try to create an example for the community, Jefferson would be ideal. There's not redistricting concerns. You've already got an active capacity. There's a minimum amount of addition to actually make that building and that site more functional. And once that's done, there's no additional property to expand into, so it's done. And I truly think you would have an example that you could put in front of the community if you're asking them for future expenditures. Something to at least give those that maybe don't deal with the details that we do from facilities or that you do from operations, but give them that example of what you're trying to do within the district at all your buildings and all your sites. So with that, this plan was developed. The options on the backside, there's 4 options there. Looking at those options, we've created a scenario of different ways of approaching an implementation of plan. Trying to identify those things that were most important to us in pretty short order after talking to some of the administrative team and looking at operationally how things would be affected. The consolidation showed us an expense savings that you wouldn't have if you didn't take that option 1, the more expensive option. You can get things taken care of in one broad swoop, go through your redistricting, get all of those things kind of put together, and then focus on the remainder of the plan of bringing those buildings up to par or up to that condition level that you want to operate at. The other options are viable. It's just that you don't accomplish the amount of savings that you would with that first option. Turning the page over and looking at the side that's got the 20-year plan laid out, we put that option 1 at the top just to show how that would be our first step. If you look at schedule, planning would be immediate. We have collected a lot of information and I think we can still pull things together, but we're really looking at the month of July as being the time for that decision to be made if we're going to do anything aggressively in the summer of 2025. The construction 2025 is listed. Just to jump down without going through some of the notes that are there, looking at phase 2, again, if there would be a vote and more community involvement in deciding on a larger expenditure, we would really earmark that for April of 2026. The continuance of construction would then happen in 2027 if there was an approval for those additional funds to be spent. And phase three, and I know it goes way out there, but phase three is really making the big plans for 2038. So looking at that, and again, the long list of other improvements that we can see today based on the information that's available regarding capacity, enrollment, dollars, and our conditions, that's kind of the plan that we've laid out. Yep.
Yeah, I know what you're getting at, and we've talked about this before, and we've heard the term time sensitive quite a bit. I just want to like step back for a minute and say, that would all be good if we were a corporation. I mean, we can make internal decisions and we move at our pace and raise our own money, but we're not a corporation. We're an educational institution that belongs to the people of this community. I want to recall that the same sort of discussion happened when we took on the issue of improving the academic performance. It was like time sensitive. We had to do it all right away. And so we had a top-down decision on that. That was fairly disastrous, I think. We had 2 years of tremendous attrition in teachers. We had a good many upset people in the community about that. We have, you know, I mean, it's been coming along fairly well since it's been implemented, but it just wasn't the right way. It wasn't the right way, at least in this community. I don't know, you know, richer communities maybe are different, but in this community to do this in another top-down haste to, like, you know, supposedly save money by spending money. And I just want to object to being put on the rush on this. I mean, I understand what you're getting at, but the fact is that number one, you know, we haven't informed the community at all about what we're even thinking. There hasn't been an article in the paper. There hasn't been anything discussed on the radio, etc. I mean, this is maybe the biggest project that we could possibly take on. And if we have a top-down approach to this, like we're IBM or something, that's just not going to work for the staff, for the students, for the families, and for the taxpayers in this community. So I'm in favor of you know, dragging this a bit. I've looked at this stuff. I mean, I see everything that's listed, and I wonder if we really need everything. Like, I mean, I think there's a serious debate to have about putting a cafeteria on Jefferson. What do we really need? You know, what does this community really want? And to say, well, we'll put up a great school that'll be a model of what Manitowoc should want to have in its schools. Manitowoc might want to have that, but Manitowoc right now is pretty pissed at the big tax increase they've just had. We're not in a good situation to raise money through referendums. I don't think we're in a good position to do a top-down decision on this without consultation and wide information going to the community and the staff people. So I'm not on board on this.
Just what I would say is certainly one of the big goals of this meeting is to make sure this information starts being readily known to the public. That's a big goal of this, is for people to know the real scale of what we're looking at and the approach that's being considered and some of the options that are being looked at. So it's an opportunity to.
I appreciate that. My concern is when I look at this, we've already decided what to do.
Yeah, right.
We have not talked to neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Manitowoc has always been a neighborhood school city. Now, maybe that's changing, maybe attitudes have changed, but we need to sit down with the people at Madison and sit down with the people at Jackson. Probably, who knows, maybe another school, but there are no options at all to do anything at those two schools that are in critical condition, as the report says. We've decided what to do before taking any input from the public, and that is wrong. That is completely wrong in a district this size. When you look at how many millions you were going to ask people to come forward with in the community, They need a voice. If we're going away from a place that you can walk to your grade school, or mom and dad can walk you, or grandma and grandpa can walk you, now they're going to get you on a bus and send you to Stangl, or send you to Monroe, or send you to some other school. We need to find out how they feel about that. And that's not here. Middle schools are in rough shape, no money in any of the options for them. And I appreciate what CISA 10 did to get the information for us, but this is a board problem, that we haven't talked to the citizens of this community about this.
We haven't talked to one another about it.
Right, I mean, rumors are out there, they're ripping down Madison, they're ripping down Jackson, the kids are gonna go bus back to Stangl. That's all out there. We're getting this tonight, and there's no option other than what somebody has decided to do. We're closing 2 grade schools. We're closing 2.
Right, I mean, you're saying that as it's a done deal. I think this is what we're, yes, there's different options on there, and it does include that. But we should, it's not concrete, let's figure it out.
Well, what I'm saying is, we've already been shown the options.
Yeah.
This is what somebody wants to do. And the options are right here. I don't see an option to invest any money into Madison. I don't see any option to invest any money into Jackson, Wilson, Washington. Don't see any of that on this. That's my concern.
And I don't want to inhibit, as you point out, a conversation amongst the board, but I'd like us to get through what they want to present to us. So that's okay. So what they want to present to us so that we then can have all of that when we're talking about it.
Totally agree. I feel like right now, we're all sitting on a boat and we're hemorrhaging like crazy and water's coming in and they want
Everybody
to
grab a
patch
bucket.
it up, but a lot of people want to talk about what we should do to patch it up.
Chris and Ava, I'd like to,
Yeah.
Katie and Lee. Sure. Come up and, kind of review.
Directors.
Everybody's been looking at this, and again, we've not made a decision. We are trying to make sure that you're aware of risk, associated with that, but, a risk is, parent reaction. A risk is taxpayer reaction if they feel like you're spending more money than you should be spending. So this is just making sure you're informed to make a decision.
This is a decision, Jim. These options are a decision, what's already been made.
No,
We haven't made these decisions yet.
That's
Well,
That's what's being proposed to us. Yeah.
the motions have been made.
I know.
I mean,
I just want to confuse anybody else because last week we had a discussion about other things and that was twisted as well.
Just 2 quick points, and I appreciate this dialogue and this discussion. This whole process with the assessment started bottom up. And when I look at Jefferson, one of the things that we've kind of cut out of this whole plan, and I'm looking at what we really look for as improvements. Again, there's not enough parking there. You've got food trucks that are unloading in the front entrance every day at noon, right in front of the visitor spot. You had a sheriff's assessment that came in and identified multiple measures that needed to be improved around that building. Again, jumping in and calling it a PM, preventive maintenance, which is on every one of these options for every school. And then if you go down to option 5, that's the bare bones. That's very similar to what's been going on in the past, I don't know, 5-10 years or longer. Those things are there, but to not take care of it and think that we haven't talked to the staff, I really think you're misinformed, because we did talk to the staff. The need for the visitor parking, the need for the staff parking, the need for controlled gates. The Sheriff's Association is saying putting in a security window. The Sheriff's Association is saying raise the fence, open the gates, have automated activities of controlling service. Get the congestion out of that front entrance every day from 11 until 12:30 or whatever it takes for those food exchanges. Those are truly bottom up items that were collected, and I can't imagine a parent not wanting those for their children going to that school, as an example.
I have no argument with that.
That's
But a
good.
parent in Jackson might have an argument if their school's being closed.
They very well
Or
might.
Madison, or Frankfurt,
They very well
you know,
might.
and that, we haven't got that input.
The direction that we understood, putting these 5 options together, was what if we just do the preventive maintenance things? What if we do the life safety priority items? And that's what you see in these options that are at a much lower number. I don't think you're gonna get ahead, and I think you're going to do things once, twice, or 3 times before you ever resolve the conditions that are existing in these buildings. Whether you close school A or close school B, again, that's up to you. We did look at it from conditions. And I do think that operationally, the district needs to take a close look of what the occupancies and how that will work. And quite frankly, I felt very good when I saw the preliminary reports from operational impacts of these same options. They lined up much better than I ever anticipated, which I thought was fantastic. But again, we haven't made this just a one decision only type thing.
You dive into that a little bit about the operations, or maybe Mr.
So again, I just appreciated that conversation, and I wanted to make sure that I emphasize the fact that a lot of our ideas didn't come flying in from corporate. They came from the staff and they came from the buildings right here, so.
One thing before we shift over though, what we're talking about is that if we reduce net one elementary school, it's $1 million savings. And I think nobody questions that, okay? Plus, there will be deferred maintenance that you don't have to incur on that building. And that goes up to a large amount depending on how fast that happens, because you don't want to put money into a school that you're going to potentially exit, okay? So it's not throwing good money after bad, is really what I'm saying there. The other point is into phase 2, and even though we're really into phase 1, these things butt up to each other. A very, very conservative estimate, if you save $1 million on an elementary, you're probably saving $3 million plus on a middle school. And so that's also considered here in terms of that savings can obviously be redirected to offset some of this taxpayer expense. And with that also, not included as a preventive maintenance, but that option 2 includes a tech center that we've been all talking about, meaning administration, not necessarily here at the board or, totally engaged outside of our building trades people, who see the benefits of that. That's also factored in here. So I just wanted to make sure we understand there's just savings here that can be used immediately that, the sooner you do that, the sooner that money works for you. That's all. But now I'll turn this over to Lee and Katie, in terms of, looking from an instructional perspective.
Thank you. And Superintendent File asked us to look at things through the instructional lens of how we're educating kids. One thing I'll say, and listening to this conversation, I think that I've learned over the course of time, living in this community for the last 22 or 3 years, is really that our schools are the heartbeat of our community. And I recognize, and so does our team, that when we start talking about anything related to buildings that might be decommissioned, or when we're talking about boundaries of where people go to school, that those are kitchen table conversations that really matter to our folks. And so we really do strongly believe that we have to get out there once we share some of these enrollment, we have to look at the data. The other story I'll tell you that is when I did arrive here in Manitowoc in the summer of 2001, we had 5,700 kids. That's minus 1,000 now. We're operating same way we've operated since then. And so as our team looked at this, we looked at this in two, you could say that's a balancing act, because it is. Because on one hand, we're talking about the heartbeat of our community, and on the other hand, we're talking about being fiscally responsible and being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And so sometimes those things don't always even out. So in our brief presentation tonight, we're hoping that you understand that we're providing you with some information that we think will be helpful for you to answer a question that I think is quite important. does the Manitowoc Public School District have it in its best interest to consolidate efforts around some of our schools? That is the question, in my opinion, that probably has to be answered first. Because that answer then leads to a vision, potentially, for what a roadmap for success may be in some of our very difficult situations. I understand the consternation, the difficulty in talking about any of this, because none of it's easy. There's not one thing in here that, makes me want to go buy a Hallmark card and send it out in gratitude, right? It's not, this isn't fun. But I want you to understand what we did here in this document we handed out from our office, just around the idea of consolidation. What we did is we wanted to develop a clear snapshot of our current reality as it relates to enrollment and the capacity of our schools. Then we wanted to analyze our enrollment data and compare that against the available number of seats in each school across the district to give you a clear picture of really what we're talking about in terms of space and students. Thirdly, we want to engage our bus company into the conversation as it does have anytime we're talking about consolidation and routes of where kids go to school. It's important really to bring those stakeholders that are going to kind of know the history of things and how things have changed over time, in which Brant did. And as we met with them, we got some, some input that we think might be helpful to conversation. And then lastly, determine the overall estimated cost of savings, which Angela and her office were very helpful to us in being able to put a estimated number around the idea of consolidation. So under the section findings, the first table is quite simple. The top section talks about our building capacity. And again, this is information we derived from the report CISA 10 delivered to us, which we're very grateful for because it really does a nice job of encapsulating what our current availability is for seats. So if you look across there, you'll see at each school the number of, or their capacity and number of students. As you move over to the column which says MPSD EL for elementary, you'll see that we have 2,200 seats available in those 6 schools. You'll see that we're currently using 1,786 of those seats for a grand total of 414 seats open. I don't think I have to be Captain Obvious here to say that's a pretty good size elementary school. On the second line, and again, what I want to point out here, because of the fact that this is the heartbeat of our community and that emotions are tied to every little piece of information that comes out of meetings like this. But what I will tell you is what we simply needed to do was to create an example for comparison purposes. So our team decided that what we would do is use Jackson and Madison as the 2 schools that we would decommission in this example. Again, I say example, simply due to the fact that in the CISA 10 report, these 2 schools seem to have had the most need in terms of tender loving care that they will require to remain in an operable condition and provide our students with a safe and an optimal learning environment. So if you go across the page on this one, what you'll see is that in recommissioning Stengel, which is a pretty large elementary school, and I will also say one piece of data, the Stengel capacity may be larger than that because in the CISA 10 report, because there were no students there currently, their capacity, they didn't do an assessment on capacity. Now, what I did is I took 420 because in 2014, there were 419 students attending that school. So we know it'll hold that many, okay? But if you take a look across there, what you end up with is 1984 available. Again, using our projected enrollment for next year of 1786, we still would have nearly 200 seats available. So the bottom section here is really, we're looking at, when we talk about elementary schools, we use the term sections. How many sections do we have of each grade level in each school? The reason we put this and included this is that on the second page of this, there's a section that Katie's going to go over on the educational impact. And we talk a little bit about the efficiencies of running 3-section schools that we've experienced in the past. And what we wanted to show you here is that we have some 4-section classrooms in our district. We also have quite a few twos and a couple ones, right? And so the magic number, we believe, when possible, is to get as close to 3 as we can. And we can explain that in a second. Before I turn it over to Katie to talk about and analyze a little bit of those other topics, does anyone have any questions about this data? Matt?
Can you re-articulate the sections just so it's a little
Sure.
easier for some people to
So let's just take a look here. Let's take a look at Franklin. Take a look on the left-hand side column, Franklin. And by the way, I'd be remiss, we have to also pay attention to the starred schools. They're AGR schools, which means we're obligated to keep class sizes low in our early grades, up to 2nd grade. So just keep that in mind. That's why you see, for example, at Franklin, that's 4 sections of kindergarten they have. And then if you follow it down, they have 4 sections of 1st grade, 3 sections of 2nd, 2 sections of 3rd, 3 sections of 4th, and 3 of 5th. And then that's how you would compare it across the district in terms of the sections that we have of each grade in each school. Are there any other questions related to this page?
The total of Jackson and Madison is 636 if I add those two together. On your findings graph, you have the number of students in each school. 379 and
57.
Yeah.
Yep.
So are we losing that many students from those 2 schools or how?
That's their capacity.
That's their capacity.
Capacity. Okay,
So-
that's not how many are there.
Correct. So enrollment, we could provide you with that, but we just wanted to show you overall that out of the 2,200 seats, we only have 1,786 in
If we
use.
were at capacity,
It would, right, it would be, that would be much narrower of a gap.
I think that's very important. Could we have that information?
Sure.
For next time?
Oh, we can
put
just email it to you. It's really quite simple. What we'll do is
Put actual, yeah,
we'll go capacity/actual.
that'd be great.
Okay.
I believe Madison is about 214 currently, off the top of my head, something.
Do you know any more? Do you know Jackson at all?
Jackson, I would be guessing now after that one, I just happened to.
Angela, do you have it available?
Yeah, give me a minute and I can, get a couple folders away.
Great question, Mr.
The other thing, just while Angela's looking it up, one of the things that I had asked for, Steve from our transportation company came forward and really quickly, we were really getting onto the same page about how we could do this and what it would take for time. Also, Jessica is really involved with technology, with closing the school year and getting ready for the next. But she went and then populated a map where you can, and I'll send this out to you tonight, so you can see that we really kind of lost the neighborhood type of idea because every school, kids are coming from across the district. Now, that means for a variety of reasons, without more detailed analysis, but I think you will not enjoy, but you will learn, to the extent that things have changed over time, where I was surprised to see almost every school had kids coming from across our boundary. So things have, but again, I'll send that to you so you can see it. We're still in the analysis stage, but it was really good. It's an interactive map where you can just highlight the school you want to see, and you can then see where where they're coming from.
Madison's at 196, these are as of our January count. Jackson was at 361. The other smallest one would be Monroe at 275.
We'll also send this to you in an email so you have it.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, so as Jim and Lee both alluded to, and I'm gonna do my best not to cough, I apologize, is we did start some initial conversations with Steve Reckley. So he just gave us some very factual information that we wanted to share, indicating really that given our current school boundaries, there would be a pretty minimal impact to our actual transportation routes, meaning from a cost perspective. So because we would be eliminating potentially decommissioning routes to one building or to 2 buildings, whatever you all decide, those routes would just be rerouted to another school. So there would be a pretty minimal impact to the cost associated with transportation. we would reassure families that in the event that school boundaries would change, we would be very sure to communicate who would be eligible for transportation. All of the students that would be impacted would be notified as to whether or not they fit into that 2-mile radius. We would have conversations as far as an instructional team is concerned, including the board, in regard to making sure that we are not excluding anyone from transportation options or making sure that we have viable options for transportation as some of those decisions would be made. And Steve was more than happy to work through what those conversations would look like in the future, but he reassured us that would, students that typically, maybe within walking distance, if they were going to a different school, would absolutely be eligible for busing, and we would just take a look at some of those outlying factors. We also talked about students who would receive transportation as part of their IEP or individualized education plan. We currently have buildings, as I shared with the board earlier in the school year. Some of our buildings offer some types of programs for students with disabilities and others don't. So we are already busing students maybe to different sites based on what their IEP team would determine as placement. So we would need to take a look at what programs would potentially be impacted by decommissioning some schools, a school, and then where we would move those programs. But again, those students, anybody with an individualized education plan has an option to receive transportation if their disability would call for that, and that's part of an IEP team decision. So Brant would continue to work with us in order to make sure that we have transportation for everybody available. And then, from Steve's perspective, and I think it was an interesting part of our conversation, when we're talking about a growing community or looking at Manitowoc, I think in the past there was some criticism about the Stengel building placement. I think originally in our community, people thought we were going to be growing toward Two Rivers potentially. And we all know that growth is kind of in our southwest region, our west region for sure. So when we're thinking about the vision and the future of Manitowoc, and we're thinking about what at this point in phase 1 we're choosing to invest in, we need to think about those things. So his point was really, operating our schools on our boundary of community, of the outside boundaries of our community, where growth is an option or potentially expected, or where there's new housing developments going up and those things, is really just a smart way to forecast out our future investments in our buildings. And the impact from a transportation perspective may feel a little bit more significant because fewer kids may have the option to walk to school, like at a Riverview or something like that, or even at a Monroe, depending on where the students are coming from. But as we're thinking about our community expansion and where those students are going, protecting those boundaries, which again then supports kids maybe from that side of town near Stengel from maybe taking the leap and enrolling in Two Rivers, because we don't have an option on that side of town. We also are helping, students have a broader area for them to attend school within the Manitowoc Public School District boundaries, if that makes sense. So that was an interesting, just a nugget for people to think about as we're thinking about the future. Really our role is considering the instructional impact. So again, when we are running 6 elementary schools, as we have, when we're talking about allocating resources, whether those are human resources or whether those are consumable or material resources, and we have a 1-section building or a building with 198 students in it with a smaller population of students with disabilities or smaller number of students that attend in general, we spread our resources pretty thin. We're talking about traveling for support staff to multiple sites. We're talking about making sure that our special teachers have access to all of these different buildings. So from an efficiency in staffing and programming, just a general, very broad overview, the fewer sites we have, the better ability we have to make sure that we're allocating resources to our staff and our students in an efficient, responsible manner. we just all got back, many of us got back from an incredible learning opportunity in Southern Illinois for the Solution Tree PLC Conference, Professional Learning Community, which is all about highly effective collaboration. It's a goal of our district. It is a priority of our district that our teachers, it is something that's embedded in SFA. It is something that our high school teams have worked on for years. Collaboration is critical to high achievement levels for students, and that's teachers having the ability to work with one another. When we have 3 section teams and your grade levels have the opportunity to collaborate with 2 other professionals on a team, and we can bring our specialists into those teams, it is so much more effective and impactful, and allows teachers to share some workload when we're talking about the opportunity to develop high quality interventions for students who may not be meeting our proficiency standards, or offer extensions for students who may be beyond. It gives people a team to be able to support the workload and support student achievement at high levels in a way that, you know, a teacher that's just one of them at a grade level or 2 at a grade level is really spread very, very thin in regard to sharing that workload, supporting students and supporting student needs. So the opportunity to collaborate in a 5 building, 3 section school would be pretty incredible for our teachers. Again, it gives us consistent opportunities for differentiation and an intervention across grade level teams, like I just said. Should have brought a water. I'm okay, thank you. Again, we can be pretty fiscally responsible. We're talking about allocating our resources. And then, you know, thanks, Lori. From a special education perspective, when we can do some consolidating, we might be able to offer a continuum of services at every site that we couldn't necessarily offer when we're spanning more sites. So we might have the ability to program for students with varying needs, because our students with disabilities population is not declining. That is one part of our enrollment that is not declining right now. So we will continue to meet those students' needs, whatever site they're at, but this could give us an opportunity to provide a continuum of services in every building, because we would consolidate our efforts in that regard. And that's in counseling services and student nursing services and, you know, our related services providers, who are all spread very thin right now. So instructionally, just some information for you all to use when you're making your decision. But we believe that there is some opportunity here in future visioning and thinking in regard to the impact on students and high achievement.
Katie, any impact with specials?
Well, I think similar to our traveling specialists, our specials teachers, again, would be able to have some more specific building assignments and maybe a little less travel involved in, because we would have consistent section numbers across buildings, which impacts our FTE for our specialists. Mike could probably speak to that a little better.
And I think the bottom line here is that as we looked at this, knowing that we want to make sure that the learning environment for all our kids is optimal across and safe, our big job was to say, can we operate as a 5-building elementary cohort district? And the answer is yes. We have plenty of space. We have the capacity within 5 of our buildings. And it honestly, it probably doesn't even matter what combination you pick. We would have room, because we would still have 198 spots. I mean, you realize Madison is a small number with capacity, so that one is a little bit, less with that one. But our recommendation would be that, we believe, based on the projections that we got from Angela, that, operationally the district could save nearly $1 million a year, which then, that comes out of our, operations, which, then could be potentially used to help with some of the deferred maintenance issues that we have in some of our other schools. but again, you know, back to where we started, the schools are the heartbeat. And so our recommendation would also include that when the board begins to have these conversations, and if there are specific schools that are targeted for potential decommissioning, that we would go out there and have conversations with those families to those sites, and also at the district level for people in the community. Because we realize that anytime we start talking about, you know, the identity and the pulse of your community being, you know, schools, that if we're talking about some of those schools not being around anymore, that's going to elicit an emotional response, which we also have to be prepared to understand, though there is also a fiscal side to this, and a side where, you know, we're in a hole a little bit with our facilities. And, you know, I also think at the same point, we have to justify the reasons why we would decommission schools. In my opinion, as a taxpayer of this community, I would also think there needs to be an explanation if we don't.
Yeah.
Right? So there's that two sides to the coin. And I just think the more, and this is where I agree, you know, with the sentiment of the board, is getting out into our communities and having these conversations with folks is how we're going to dispel rumors and how we're going to set the record straight, because much of what you see in this report is just factual information. And sensible people, when given factual information, can make sensible decisions and sometimes even take emotion out of them. So, you know, we hope that this information helps the board in you know, determining the next steps, and please let us and our offices know how we can help, or what other information that you may need.
I know you do curriculum and, you know, the academic program, but Green Bay just closed down 3 schools. I didn't notice that there was any, you know, upheaval there. I'd like to know how they handled the public relations of that. You know, I think that, first of all, I bet most people in Manitowoc aren't aware that there's a bit of a crisis here from 20 years of neglect, et cetera, you know, that we had a study done in a responsible way, and it came up and said, well, this is our take on it, you know. We talked to teachers and administrators, you know, custodial staff, et cetera, and boy, this is like a big deal. This is a big deal. And that might be a good article right there itself. And for the community to be able to know that and discuss it among themselves at the kitchen table and otherwise. Then the second thing would be an article, or, you know, and certainly a discussion on enrollment. And that if we're going to like try to balance off, you know, the need for more revenue, the need for more taxes, and the needs for, you know, to carry out the program that people want us to do in terms of educating the children of this community, we really need to talk about decommissioning schools. And then I would guess a third step would be on, well, here's how we might be able to do this. That's sort of the leadership part, it seems to me. I mean, you leave them with the problems so they can talk about it, so that by the time we're ready to like ask for money, they've already like thought about this. Not maybe everybody, but, you know, it's hard to believe that, you know, people got so bent out of shape on changing 2 streets from 1 way to 2 ways that this community wouldn't talk about this a lot. So I think that we need to do that before we say, okay, here's what we're going to do. I mean, I think we got it backwards at this point. I mean, I think among ourselves, I think the suggestion for, you know, Jackson and Madison, well, that's a reasonable suggestion. But I don't think we're ready to like do a hard ass vote on this.
You guys looked at Stangl McKinley and where that program would move to? Or are we getting rid of that program?
Well, we won't get rid of the program. We would have the capacity
where is it?
within existing buildings likely to move some programs around. You know, the other piece of the coin could be that in a transition, we also take a look at, you know, which of the two decommissioned schools is in the best shape that we may be able to get some life out of for some other purposes within the district. You know, I mean, you know, we have to look at all of our assets, this building included, and, right? So.
I was gonna say, I tend to be an optimist, and so many districts have done a good job of recruiting people, kids, to their district. And we don't do that. So my hope would be that perhaps the PR person could start a program to get information out, to say, hey, come to the public schools. We have this and this and this and this and this program. So we stop the decline because of the birth rates. But my other concern is, okay, so could you take one of those two grade schools that you're getting rid of and turn it into the Lindbergh Drive and sell this place? Because you could use, in the future, you may need that if Manitowoc started to grow. You know,
And I think, you know, when we're thinking about our, you know, our private school partners in our community and our surrounding school districts are investing in their facilities and they're building brand new, shiny, beautiful 21st century learning facilities, and that attracts families. Those facilities there's a pride when your school building looks pretty awesome when you're rolling up at the start of the day. So, you know, if we want to continue to be competitive in our area and we want to attract families, then we need the face of our school district, which is our buildings, to also be attractive when people are touring and they're coming in. I agree.
You know, just, you know, some more. You know, first of all, John, anything, you know, again, you know, one of the challenges is any school in worse shape than another. You know, that's one. And one of the things you may not have picked up is we can only consolidate so much because we do need that space. And one school, one of the elementaries that we would keep operating really needs to be decommissioned and built new or rebuilt. Like Lincoln High School. You know, Lincoln High School probably needs to be rebuilt or built new. But the resources are just beyond what we could expect as public to put their arms around. That's part of the challenge, and that's why, you know, 2 referendums are probably needed, and we put the one out, but it's important to note, you know, how important the leveraging of resources are. We would not do things like fix the cafeteria offering at Lincoln High School, because you'd be potentially putting money into something you would really want to redo or build new. Okay, so some of that plan, these 3-phase plans, is also holding back on expenditures because you really need to, you know, the building isn't worth investing in without a totally redo or build new. You know, so I mean, it's really complex, it's really hard, but unfortunately, this is 10, 20 years of neglect. You know, in terms of where we could have been enhancing certain facilities or educating the community about how important facility referendums are, like most of the districts in the state have. We just don't. You know, we were also funding a low operating referendum, you know, until this last year. We were not, because of the state's funding system, which we're on the short end of the stick, the only way we could do that was with operating referendum, and fortunately, Angela, you know, helped elevate that amount of money. Unfortunately, we came off a dip, so it made it, you know, seem like that much more, but it really wasn't. It was just, again, going above where we were, which wasn't enough.
And if I can add just a little bit of the perspective that makes us different from, I would say, our communities directly to the north and to the south, is we have no debt as a district, which creates an additional challenge. So to the north, they approved building a high school over 20 years ago. The debt fell off. Adding on another round of debt was very, very minimal in the grand scheme of things. To our south, they have been defeasing, and a lot of districts statewide have been doing that, where they've been just paying ahead on debts. And so when they wanna take on a large borrowing, it's a very small impact. So there's a lot to consider, and I don't wanna get in too much into the weeds unless you want some more information on some of that. Happy to provide it. But it's, anything that we're going to add is going to gonna need a large amount of community support. Because it's not gonna be a small impact in total over the range of all the plans.
Yeah, well, when you look at this, grand total is about $450 million. And that's a big bite. Now, admittedly, that spreads out over about, what, 15 to 25 years?
Correct.
But that's still a considerable amount of money. So that's why I think it's so important that we're talking about it well in advance, so people can start to get an idea of what we're looking at, where we're headed, and what some of these costs are. Because many of these things are things that we have to decide. It's not like we have a choice to do nothing.
Yeah.
It's what we're going to do, and then how we're gonna pay for it. Thank you.
I'd just like to say thank you for all the presentations today, and very, very helpful information. And Mr. President, do we have a finance and facilities meeting scheduled for July? Because I'm in that committee, and I believe the committee chairman asked us to forego the next meeting. And I would personally think that's ridiculous because of the situation or the state of affairs we're in and the set of reality that we're in. So I don't know why we would not meet for another 2 months, a month and a half. So that's I just want to state that.
We can have one without it. We can do
Okay,
that.
I just think it's kind of pertinent information if we're
Yeah.
going to kick it back to committee to have committee meetings.
I don't know to whom I would ask this question. Have we looked at what the like, for example, I'm not creating any issues with the concept or the methodology used for the consolidation consideration, which basically writes us to about, because right now we're at about 1,800 students, and it would prepare us for about 2,000. But do we have any data projections for what we're looking at for 5 years and 10 years down the road? Because if we're writing to about 2,000 K-5 students, and we know 5 years from now, we're gonna have at best 1,500, then we want to be prepared to think about how we face towards that. So
Yeah, we have that information.
Okay,
We can share that too.
okay, thank you.
We'll send up a follow-up email from this presentation with some of the things we talked about or people asked for. That'll include that as well.
Thank you.
I make a motion to adjourn.
One of the things that we would be looking at, is taking this back to facilities and then coming back, at the regular board meeting with a recommendation to proceed. That doesn't mean you have to accept that.
Right.
But looking at the options, and that's why it was important to understand that you're talking about $1 million in savings if you start acting on this. And that was the critical decision of whether or not that was critical for you to understand that. Okay, but you have the option to delay. I mean, that's unfortunately what we've done, is delayed, and that's part of our problem. And so I just wanted to make sure that, you have, so you can make an informed decision.
Okay.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
What was the second?
Matthew, second. Thank you.
There's a few things on the agenda yet.
Oh, what do
Yeah.
well, I'm not gonna make any remarks.
You're not.
So future dates, I'll. Do
Pardon me?
you have any future dates for us?
Yeah, we have one on the second Tuesday.
Personnel, policy on July 1st, curriculum instruction on July 1st.
Yep.
And the regular one on the 9th.
Yeah.
When everybody shows up sunburned because
Yeah.
of the 4th. And I'll work on the facilities and finance meeting. Okay,
Thank you.
all right. So we have a motion and a second.
Yep, motion second.
Yep.
All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Okay, thank you.